You never expect your life to come crashing down on an ordinary Tuesday. It started like any other evening. I'd just gotten home from work, same old grind, long hours, heavy deadlines, and a boss who thinks personal time is a myth. The house smelled faintly of my wife's cooking chicken casserole, if I had to guess, though I was getting used to reheating my dinner alone these days. Nicole had been working late, a lot lately. The kids were in the living room, whispering, their voices low but urgent. Normally, I wouldn't have thought much of it. Kids share secrets, after all, but something in their tone made me freeze. My son Mason, 15, and my daughter Emma, 13, both huddled near the staircase, unaware that I had come in through the garage door. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when your own kids mention your name like this, you listen. "Don't tell Dad," Mason whispered. Emma's voice trembled. "But he's going to find out eventually. He'll leave her. You know how Dad is, he'll start drinking again. And then what? We'll be broke, homeless even." Mason's response was firm. "We're not telling him. Not now. Not ever. As long as we stick together, he won't find out. Mom says everything will be fine if we just keep quiet." I felt the blood drain from my face. My legs went numb. Leave her? Drinking? Broke? What the hell were they talking about? What was Nicole hiding from me, hiding with the help of my own children? My gut twisted with a sick sense of dread. And yet, even in that moment, I kept my face neutral and my steps light as I headed into the kitchen like I'd heard nothing. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Nicole was unusually cheerful, too cheerful. She asked about work, made small talk about the weather, the school fundraiser, all while completely ignoring the fact that the kids barely touched their food and refused to meet my eyes. I played along, smiled, nodded, acted like the clueless fool they all assumed I was. But inside, something had shifted. A quiet click, like the safety coming off a loaded gun. That night, after Nicole went to bed, after I heard her breathing settle into that soft rhythm she always had when she slept, I made my way to Mason's room. I hadn't checked his room in years. He was a good kid, or so I thought. But now? Now I needed answers. His door creaked slightly as I pushed it open. Posters of his favorite bands covered the walls. His laptop sat on the desk, locked. No surprise. But it was the corner of his closet that caught my eye, a slight gap where the door didn't fully close. I opened it. At first, nothing unusual. Clothes, old sneakers, some school projects. But tucked behind a box of video games, I found a shoebox. And inside that box, well, that was the moment everything unraveled. Photos. Printed out. Dozens of them. Nicole. And another man. Same man. Over and over again. Restaurants. Hotel lobbies. One shot of them kissing behind the wheel of a car that wasn't mine. A silver BMW, license plate partially visible. They weren't even being discreet. She looked happy, giddy, even, like the version of Nicole I hadn't seen in years. I felt my hands trembling, my heart pounding in my ears. Underneath the photos was a folded-up piece of paper, an email printout. "Can't wait for next weekend. Same room, same time. You looked incredible tonight." Signed only with the initial D. I stared at that letter, my vision blurring, my breath coming short and fast. My marriage was a lie. My wife, the woman I worked 2 jobs to support, the mother of my children, had not only betrayed me, but dragged our kids into her web of lies. And worst of all, my children thought they were protecting me. They didn't realize they had just lit a fire inside me that would never burn out. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the images burned behind my eyelids, Nicole's smile, that stranger's hand on her back, the two of them tangled together in moments that were supposed to belong to me. But I wasn't going to fall apart. Not this time. I'd made that mistake once, years ago, when my father walked out on my mother after his own little mistake came to light. He fell into the bottle and never came back out. I swore back then I'd never let myself be that man. I built my life differently. Or so I thought. Now, here I was, my worst nightmare wearing my own face. But instead of breaking, something inside me sharpened. Cold. Focused. Controlled. If she wanted to destroy our life, she was going to learn exactly who she married. They all were. The next morning, Nicole hummed softly as she made breakfast. She even kissed me on the cheek like nothing had changed. The kids sat at the table, quiet again, stealing nervous glances at each other. Mason knew I'd been in his room. I could see it in his eyes, a flicker of something like panic mixed with guilt. But he said nothing. Neither did I. "Big day today," Nicole said, flipping pancakes. "Meeting with a new client this afternoon, so I might be home late again." I forced a smile. Of course, honey. You've been working so hard lately. Oh, you know how it is, she said with a laugh that suddenly made my skin crawl. Gotta keep those clients happy. Happy clients. Right. I played along, like a fool. But I was done playing the fool. That afternoon, instead of heading to my office, I called in sick. Sat in my truck 2 streets away from the hotel printed on the email I found. The Regency Suites. Discreet enough for affairs, but not so fancy it would draw attention. Exactly her style. Hours passed. At 2:45 p.m., a silver BMW rolled into the parking lot. Same plates. The man stepped out first, tall, clean-shaven, expensive suit. Mid-40s. Looked like the kind of guy who signs deals, not the type who earns them. Nicole arrived 5 minutes later. I watched them embrace. Not a hug, the kind of embrace that twists your gut into knots. Her hand slid behind his neck like muscle memory. She kissed him like she hadn't kissed me in years. I didn't photograph it. Not yet. I wanted more. I wanted the whole picture. That night, I pulled Mason aside after Nicole had gone to bed. He was terrified. Dad, please don't. Sit down, son. He obeyed. His lip quivered, but I saw the relief in his eyes too, the kind that only comes when a heavy secret finally meets daylight. You know, I began, my voice calm. I'm not angry at you. You were trying to protect me. I get that. His shoulders shook slightly. I thought if you found out, you'd leave. Like Grandpa did. I inhaled deeply, steadying my anger. My father's sins weren't mine to repeat. That man, Mason. The one in the photos. Do you know who he is? Mason nodded. His name's Darren. He owns some real estate firm downtown. Mom met him through some charity thing, I think. I clenched my fists under the table. Darren. Now the face had a name. How long? I asked. Mason swallowed. Since, maybe last year. Emma found out first. Then she told me. We didn't want to ruin everything. I stared at my son, at the fear written all over his face. My own flesh and blood, trapped in a grown-up nightmare they didn't deserve. Listen to me carefully, Mason. You didn't ruin anything. This is on your mother. And him. But I need you to do something now. He nodded, wide-eyed. Whatever happens, you don't lie for her anymore. Understand? Yes, sir. Good, I said softly. And no matter what your mother says, you don't blame yourself. You and Emma, you're my kids. Nothing changes that. For the first time in weeks, Mason broke. Tears poured from his eyes as I pulled him into my arms. The truth was out. Now it was time to act. The next morning, Nicole kissed me goodbye again. Same sweet little routine, same lie behind her perfect smile. I kissed her back. The performance was getting easier. She thought I was still in the dark. But I had clarity now. And clarity is a dangerous thing. After the kids went off to school and Nicole headed to work, I made a call. An old friend picked up on the first ring. Tommy, I said. I need a favor. You name it, Tommy said. We'd grown up together, me, a family man now. Him, a private investigator after burning out from the force. We couldn't have ended up in more different places, but I always knew Tommy was the guy you called when you needed to know everything. I told him everything I'd discovered, the photos, the emails, the hotel meetings. Damn, Tommy said. You sure you want to go down this road? I don't have a choice. All right, man, he said, his voice steady. Text me the guy's name. I'll start digging. Darren Whitaker, I said, my jaw tightening as I spoke his name aloud for the first time. Real estate prick, Tommy muttered. Yeah, I know the type. Give me 48 hours. While Tommy did his work, I did mine. That night at dinner, I studied Nicole. She was glowing. The affair had given her a kind of sick energy, that spark I hadn't seen in years. She laughed at Emma's school stories, complimented Mason's math grade, and leaned over to squeeze my hand like everything was perfect. She was rehearsing normal. I played along. The next day, Tommy called. You might want to sit down for this, he said. Talk. Darren Whitaker. Married. 2 kids. Real estate developer. But that's just the surface. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Go on. He's got a habit. Nicole isn't the first, but not by a long shot. There are other women. Hotel rendezvous, business trips that weren't business, private condos he keeps for meetings. He's been doing this for years. I swallowed the bile in my throat. Nicole wasn't special to him. She was one of many. Disposable. Does his wife know? Not yet. But get this, his wife's father? He's Darren's biggest financial backer. Real old money type. If this blows up, Darren loses everything. The company, the house, the cars, The whole shiny empire. The gears turned in my mind. The picture was getting clearer now. Nicole wasn't just cheating. She was gambling. On Darren. She thought she was upgrading, trading in the man who paid for braces, school trips, and mortgage payments for the guy who promised private jets and beachfront property. Only she didn't realize Darren wasn't stable. He was a house of cards. And now, I knew how to knock it down. The next night, I staged another conversation with Mason. It was important. "Hey, buddy," I said as we shot hoops in the driveway. "I know you've been carrying a lot. You okay?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Better. Since we talked." "Good. I want you to keep doing what you're doing. Act normal. Don't let Mom think anything's different." "You're not gonna leave, right?" he asked, his voice small. I crouched and gripped his shoulder firmly. "I promise you this. No matter what happens, I'm not abandoning you or your sister. Ever." His eyes welled up again, but this time, there was something else in them. Relief. By the following weekend, Tommy had gathered everything. Photos, bank statements, emails, hotel records. Enough to ruin Darren personally, professionally, and legally. But I wasn't going to use it just yet. No. I was going to let Nicole keep digging her grave a little deeper. Because I knew something she didn't. 2 weeks from now was our anniversary. 10 years of marriage. And this year, I had something very special planned. The strange thing about betrayal is how normal life pretends to stay while your world quietly rots beneath your feet. Nicole was glowing that morning. She sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through her phone, humming softly. Her hair was perfectly done, her blouse ironed crisp, like she had nothing in the world to hide. I watched her like a man watching a predator, not a wife. Because that's what she had become: cunning, calculating, charming on the surface but rotting underneath. "Any plans for our anniversary?" she asked sweetly, setting her phone down. I smiled. "Actually, yeah. I've got something big planned." Her eyes lit up. "Really? You never planned anything big." "Not true, sweetheart. Not true at all. Thought I'd surprise you this year. 10 years, it's special." I sipped my coffee, watching her reaction like a hawk. She was trying to read me, trying to calculate how much I knew. But my face gave her nothing. "Well," she said, forcing that little giggle she always used to cover nerves, "I can't wait." She didn't know it yet, but she was right. She wouldn't have to wait long. Everything was almost in place. I spent the next few days building the stage. First, I contacted Darren's wife, Julia Whitaker. It was a risky move, but one I couldn't avoid. She deserved the truth as much as I did, and I needed her on my side for what came next. The meeting was at a small coffee shop across town. Neutral ground. Julia walked in wearing the kind of armor only the wealthy know how to wear: designer clothes, flawless makeup, perfect posture. But her eyes gave her away: sharp, suspicious, but also tired. Like a woman who's been gaslit one too many times. "You said you have information," she opened, skipping any pleasantries. "I do." I slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything Darren's been doing. And not just with my wife. With others too." She looked at me for a long moment, lips tightening. Then she took the drive and tucked it into her purse without even looking at it. "You're sure? Positive? Why tell me?" she asked. "Because unlike your husband and my wife, I still believe in burning liars slowly, not impulsively." She actually smirked at that. "You're more patient than most men." "I've had to be." She sipped her coffee, her hands steady. "What do you want?" "Nothing. Yet." I paused. "But when I make my move, I need you to stay silent for a while. I need them both to feel safe, like they've gotten away with it. Then, when the time's right, we bring it all down." Julia stared at me, processing. She was sharp. I could see the gears turning in her head. "Agreed," she finally said. "Let me know when." I nodded. And just like that, I had my first ally. The next step was securing the financial angle. Nicole didn't know I'd been quietly pulling money from our joint accounts for weeks, funneling it into private holdings she couldn't touch. I'd already seen the shopping bag stacking up, the unexplained credit card charges, the vacation she was planning behind my back. She thought she was getting ahead. She was actually walking into a financial trap so tight she'd choke on her designer scarf. The house was quiet that night as I sat in my office, reviewing every piece of evidence again. The emails, the hotel reservations, the texts. One message from Darren to Nicole caught my attention. "When you finally leave him, baby, we'll have everything. You deserve better than him. You deserve someone who makes you feel alive." I stared at that message for a long time. Feel alive. That's what she told herself to justify it all. But soon, She was going to feel something very different. Not alive. Cornered. 2 weeks left until the anniversary. 2 weeks until everything came crashing down. The knife was sharpened. I just needed to pick the perfect time to drive it in. The beauty of setting a trap is watching your prey walk into it, fully convinced they're in control. Nicole was thriving. At least, that's what she thought. She kept playing the role of devoted wife, cooking, kissing, laughing at my jokes. Like nothing was unraveling under her feet. She had no idea I was quietly dismantling the entire illusion she'd built. Darren was the same. Arrogant. Untouchable. Still meeting Nicole at the hotel every few days. Still playing the part of the charming knight in shining armor. The man had a routine like clockwork. Predictable. Sloppy. They were both predictable. And that's exactly what made my plan bulletproof. During those 2 weeks leading up to our anniversary, I kept everything normal. I smiled. I complimented Nicole on her new dress, the one Darren probably paid for. I pretended to be the same fool she'd been manipulating for over a year. The kids noticed a change, though. Mason was watching me closely. He could tell something was brewing behind my calm expression. And Emma, she clung to me a little tighter when I hugged her goodnight. They didn't understand what was happening, but they would. In time. 4 days before the anniversary, I received another call from Tommy. Got something new for you, he said. Talk. Your buddy Darren's been making moves, shady ones. He's been shifting assets into private shell companies. Offshore accounts. Looks like he's preparing for the possibility of divorce. Interesting, I muttered. Oh, it gets better. He's doing it behind his father-in-law's back. If Julia's old man finds out, Darren's done. Completely. I grinned into the receiver. Good work. And your wife? Tommy asked, his tone lowering. She still thinks I'm blind, I said, staring across the room at Nicole, who was cheerfully scrolling through her phone on the couch. She has no idea how much time she's got left. How far are you taking this, brother? Tommy asked, his voice tinged with concern. I paused for a beat. All the way, I finally answered. 3 days before the anniversary, I booked a private meeting with my attorney. I'd known Mark for years. Sharp, ruthless, and loyal. You sure you want to pull the trigger now? He asked after reviewing everything I'd collected. Not yet, I said. But I want every piece of paper ready to go. Divorce papers, financial protections, custody filings. He nodded. I can have everything ready in 48 hours. Once you serve her, you'll be fully locked in. Make sure the kids are protected, I added. That's priority one. You're playing this smart, Mark said. Cold, but smart. I stared out his office window for a moment, gripping the edge of the desk. She didn't leave me any other option. 2 days before the anniversary, I got one final call from Julia. Everything is ready on my end, she said calmly. You give me the signal. I'll have my father confront Darren directly. His empire will collapse before he knows what hit him. Perfect, I said. We go on our anniversary. Poetic, she whispered. Exactly. The night before, Nicole was in bed next to me, asleep or pretending to be. Her breathing was steady, but I knew her well enough to catch the tension in her shoulders. Her mind wasn't on me. It was with him, but not for much longer. I watched her in the dim glow of the nightlight, studying the face of the woman who had gutted our marriage, turned my children into accomplices, and risked our entire family for some cheap, fleeting thrill. My stomach burned, but my mind stayed calm. Tomorrow was the day. She just didn't know yet. The morning of our anniversary was calm, quiet, almost peaceful. Nicole made breakfast like she always did. Eggs, bacon, fresh coffee. She even lit a candle, like we were newlyweds again. I watched her move around the kitchen, humming softly like some doting housewife from a bad 50s sitcom. I smiled, played my part. After all, it was our 10-year anniversary. She wanted the illusion of a happy marriage. I was happy to give it to her, for one last day. The kids left for school like normal. I kissed both of them on the head and told Mason, quietly, tonight, everything changes, but you don't need to be scared. His eyes widened with a mix of confusion and fear. But he nodded. Nicole, of course, had plans. She mentioned casually that she had to run some last-minute errands for our evening together. My stomach twisted as I nodded, pretending not to know that errands meant another hotel rendezvous with Darren. At noon, Tommy called. She checked into the hotel, he said. Room 418. Darren arrived 20 minutes ago. Good. Stay in position. Make sure you get everything. Don't worry, brother. I've got multiple angles covered. Pictures. Video. Everything you need. This was the final nail, irrefutable evidence, collected just hours before everything was about to crash down on both of them. I wasn't going to confront her in some emotional scene. That's not how this was going to end. I was going to destroy her world methodically, brick by brick, the same way she dismantled our marriage. That afternoon, I met Julia one last time. She handed me a flash drive loaded with everything her father had gathered on Darren: financial crimes, fraudulent contracts, money laundering. When this goes public, he's finished, she said flatly. And my father will personally make sure the board strips him of everything. Company. Assets. Reputation. Perfect, I said. And your wife? Julia asked. By tonight, I replied, she'll have nothing left but the clothes on her back. Julia smiled slightly. Not out of cruelty, out of mutual understanding. We were both victims of the same sickness. Two spouses who'd been treated like stepping stones. Now we were flipping the board. By 5 p.m., Nicole returned home, all smiles, dressed like a goddess for our romantic evening. Long black dress, diamond earrings, flawless makeup. She looked breathtaking, like a woman who believed she still controlled the narrative. You look amazing, I said softly. Thank you, sweetheart, she whispered, leaning in to kiss me, tasting of expensive perfume and someone else's cologne. I didn't flinch. She thought she was untouchable. Dinner reservations were already made at her favorite restaurant. Candlelight. Wine. The whole act. I let her sit across from me, gushing about how lucky we were, how strong we were to make it this far. I nodded, smiled, let her keep digging. Finally, over dessert, I took her hand. I have a gift for you, I said. Her eyes sparkled. Oh, you didn't have to. No, I interrupted, pulling the envelope from my jacket. It's something special. A little. Life-changing, actually. She opened it. At first, her face froze, eyes darting across the first few pages. Divorce papers. The smile cracked. What is this? Read carefully, I whispered. It's all there. The evidence. The hotel footage. The bank transfers. The photos. The emails. And a copy for your attorney, by the way. Her breath hitched. Hands trembling now. You knew, she stammered. I've known for a long time, I replied calmly. I've simply been waiting for the right moment to let you feel what betrayal really tastes like. Her skin went pale. And Darren, she tried to bluff. You can't prove. I slid a second envelope across the table. Julia and her father say otherwise. Darren's finished. Financially. Legally. Socially. It's all coming out. Nicole looked like she might vomit. You can't do this, she whispered. I leaned in closer, my voice ice cold now. I already have. For a few moments, Nicole just sat there completely frozen, like her brain couldn't process the depth of the hole she had fallen into. I watched her squirm. I watched the panic creep into her eyes. I watched her face shift through denial, fear, and finally desperation. You don't have to do this, she whispered, voice shaking. We can fix this. We can do. I cut her off with a small, bitter smile. Fix this? You mean like how you fixed our marriage while screwing Darren in hotel rooms? Or how you used our kids to cover for you? Her lip quivered. The kids, they don't know everything. We can still protect them. We can figure this out. That's when I let the blade sink in a little deeper. I already protected them. You don't even know how far gone you are, do you? Every account you tried to siphon? I moved the money weeks ago. Every asset you thought you'd walk away with? Frozen. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The color drained from her face. And as of this morning, I added, Darren's wife filed for divorce, with full financial disclosures attached. His father-in-law is going to gut him publicly. He'll be lucky to keep his car, let alone his company. Nicole shook her head in disbelief, barely whispering, No, this can't. Oh, it can, I said softly. You thought you were trading up. You gambled everything, our marriage, our family, your dignity for a man who's about to lose everything. Tears welled up, but I saw no regret in them. Only fear. Fear of consequences. Fear of losing the lifestyle she had risked everything to chase. That was always Nicole's game. It was never love. It was leverage. But now? She had none. We left the restaurant in silence. She tried to speak again in the car, tried to plead, but I kept my eyes on the road, the grip on the steering wheel firm. She knew it was over. When we arrived home, Mason and Emma were waiting in the living room. Nicole's face twisted. Now she wanted to wear the mother mask again. Mason. Emma, your father is confused. He's. I raised my hand, cutting her off. Don't, I said flatly. No more lies. The kids looked between us, the tension suffocating. Mason's jaw was tight. Emma clutched his arm nervously. Mason, I said gently. I told you I'd handle it. And I have. He nodded silently. His shoulders dropped just slightly, relief breaking through his fear. Nicole glanced around, realizing for the first time that even her children were no longer in her corner. You don't understand, she started. No, I snapped, my voice now cold steel. You don't understand. For months, you thought you were the puppeteer. You thought you controlled everything. My emotions. The kids. The finances. Even your little affair. But you made one mistake, Nicole. Her lip trembled. What mistake? You underestimated me. She didn't sleep that night. I heard her pacing the bedroom floor while I lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Every few minutes she'd pause, probably hoping I would speak. I didn't. I let her sit in her own silence. And tomorrow? Tomorrow the real consequences would begin. The legal filings would hit the courthouse. The accounts would be officially split. The custody agreement would be executed. Full custody for me. Supervised visitation for her until the courts could assess the psychological damage she'd done to Mason and Emma. Darren? He was about to face state and federal investigations thanks to Julia and her father. And Nicole? She was about to lose everything she had tried to steal. Morning sunlight broke through the blinds like a spotlight on a crime scene. Nicole was sitting at the edge of the bed, pale, disheveled, clutching her phone like a lifeline. I didn't say a word as I got dressed and calmly gathered the folders I had prepared. Please. She whispered, voice cracking. We don't have to involve the courts. We can settle this between us. I turned slowly, my voice steady and deliberate. You want to settle this now? After all the months of lies? After you dragged our kids into your little secret? After you gambled away your own life? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. What could she possibly say? That it was a mistake? That she didn't mean for it to happen? That somehow this all just spiraled beyond her control? I wasn't interested in her rehearsed excuses. I'd heard enough lies to last a lifetime. By 10 a.m., my attorney Mark had filed the papers with the court. Everything we had built together, house, savings, investments, was now legally partitioned. Except the difference was, I had insulated most of our assets and trusts months ago, while she was still too busy sneaking off to hotel rooms. She didn't even know what she had already lost. Meanwhile, Darren's collapse had begun right on schedule. Julia and her father were brutal. Surgical. That morning, the financial press ran headlines. Whitaker Realty CEO accused of fraud and infidelity, criminal investigation opened. The board immediately suspended him pending investigation. His father-in-law publicly denounced him. Half his clients pulled out by lunchtime. By evening, his attorneys were issuing desperate press statements. The man Nicole risked it all for was falling faster than either of us had anticipated. That night, Nicole finally broke. I found her sitting on the floor of the living room, mascara streaked, eyes swollen. She looked up at me for the first time, genuinely small. You planned all of this, she whispered, voice shaking. Yes, I said coldly. I planned it all. While you were busy playing house with Darren, I was preparing for war. Her shoulders heaved with silent sobs. You always said you loved me, she choked. I stared at her for a long moment. I did. Once. My voice didn't waver. But you killed that man. You killed him the second you dragged our children into your mess. Her tears weren't for me. They were for herself. For what she was losing. That's the thing about people like Nicole. They don't feel guilt. Only consequences. The next few days were a blur of depositions, legal meetings, and public spectacle. Nicole's name was being dragged through the dirt right alongside Darren's. The photos Tommy had gathered? Leaked anonymously, of course. The video? Even worse. Her reputation as the pillar of the community evaporated overnight. The charity board she served on? Dropped her. The boutique firm she occasionally consulted for? Cut ties. The friends she gossiped with at brunch? Silent. Nicole was now radioactive. Mason and Emma stayed close to me, clinging to the last piece of stability left in their lives. I made sure they were protected from the worst of it, but they weren't blind. They saw enough. They saw what their mother had done, and what I had done in return. One night, Mason quietly asked, Dad, is it finally over? I put my hand on his shoulder. Almost, I said, because there was still one final card I was holding. The card that would leave her completely exposed. By now, Nicole was a ghost in her own home. She barely left the bedroom. The phone calls had stopped. The friends had vanished. Even her own parents, who used to dote on her every whim, were avoiding the storm she created. They hadn't returned her calls in days once the media circus began airing the dirty laundry. Funny how loyalty evaporates when public shame knocks on the door. The financial investigators moved swiftly. Between Darren's fraudulent shell companies and Nicole's consulting payments, the forensic accountants uncovered patterns of illegal transfers. Whether Nicole knew it was illegal or not wouldn't matter to the authorities. She was involved, and now she was exposed. Mark, my attorney, called me late that evening. His voice calm but direct. "It's done," he said. "State investigators are officially opening a case. Both Darren and Nicole will be named. The DA's office will likely push for plea bargains, but the press coverage alone will bury them socially. The rest is just paperwork." I sat in my office for a long moment after hanging up. The storm I had orchestrated was complete. The empire she had tried to build on deception had crumbled into ash. But there was still one loose end. One final move. The next morning, Nicole stumbled into the kitchen while I made breakfast for the kids. Her face was pale, hollowed, like she hadn't slept in days. I need to talk to you," she rasped. I didn't look at her. "You've said enough." I didn't think it would go this far," she whispered, trembling. "I never meant to lose the kids. Or everything." I finally turned to her. My voice was cold steel. "You didn't lose them. You threw them away. Just like you threw away your marriage. For what? Some aging real estate predator who was using you like every other woman he cycled through." She winced, but I didn't let up. "You risked your family. You risked your children. And you dragged them into your lies to cover your own selfish decisions." Tears streamed down her face now, but I saw them for what they were, not sorrow, but fear. Fear of consequence. Fear of reality. "You could have walked away with dignity. You could have told me the truth before it ever came to this. I might have even respected your honesty," I continued. "But you didn't. You lied. You manipulated. You used our kids as shields." I leaned in closer. My voice dropped into a whisper. "And now you're going to live with the fallout. Every single day." That afternoon, her attorney called mine. She was ready to accept the full custody agreement. No alimony. No claim on the house. No fight left. I almost pitied her. Almost. The kids and I moved forward like a unit. Mason had his grades back up. Emma was smiling again. The weight that had hung over the house for months finally lifted as Nicole packed her things. She would be allowed to see the kids under supervision, a detail the court insisted upon given the psychological strain she had inflicted. But those visits would be few and far between. She left with 2 suitcases and a used car registered under her name. Everything else stayed with us, exactly where it belonged. A week later, I received one final package. It came from Julia Whitaker. Inside was a bottle of high-end bourbon and a simple card. Asterisk, to clean endings and quiet victories. Julia, asterisk. I chuckled quietly. She understood. We hadn't just survived. We had outmaneuvered them. Cold. Calculated. Surgical. The way betrayal deserved to be answered. The house felt different now. Not quieter, peaceful. No more whispered conversations behind my back. No more lies buzzing through Nicole's phone while she smiled at me across the dinner table. No more forced laughter masking her guilt. Just peace. Real peace. For the first time in months, I woke up without that heavy weight sitting on my chest. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to keep up the charade for the sake of my kids, my sanity, or my pride. The storm was over. The kids were adjusting better than I expected. Mason especially. He'd been carrying a secret far too heavy for his age, and now that it was off his shoulders, you could see it in the way he carried himself. We started spending more time together, real time. Not the distracted dinners of before, where Nicole's absence or nervous glances poisoned the air. We rebuilt our routine like men piecing together a house that had survived a fire. Basketball in the driveway. Weekend fishing trips. Late-night movies where Emma would fall asleep halfway through, snuggled under a blanket on the couch. We were healing, and for the first time, I could breathe. Nicole's life, however, was a very different picture. The legal charges hadn't completely vanished, but her cooperation, or more likely, her desperation, earned her a plea deal. She'd avoid prison time, but the fines and financial penalties were crippling. Everything she once valued, status, money, reputation, was gone. I heard she moved into a small apartment across town. No more luxury cars, no designer bags, no charity luncheons with the other bored wives who once fawned over her at fundraisers. Her phone calls to the kids grew more desperate, more pitiful. But the court-appointed family therapist kept a close watch. Nicole wasn't allowed unsupervised visits yet. Maybe not for years. She had built her entire identity around being admired, desired, envied. No, she had none of it. Just her own reflection, aging faster than she ever feared. And Darren? He was facing multiple federal charges. Tax fraud, wire fraud, securities violations. His empire was disassembled piece by piece under the bright spotlight of prosecutors eager to make an example out of him. Last I heard, he'd struck a plea deal to avoid prison time for his wife's sake. Julia was as ruthless as she was intelligent, but his name was permanently scorched. No respectable company would ever touch him again. He wouldn't be charming his way into another affair anytime soon, not without a bank account to back it up. Sometimes, people ask if I feel bitter. Strangely, no. There's no bitterness left. That emotion belongs to the men who didn't take control when everything started falling apart. The ones who let betrayal crush them. I chose differently. I faced the betrayal, studied it, controlled it, and turned it into something else. Leverage. And that's why I sleep soundly now. Because when the ground beneath me cracked, I didn't fall. I built a new foundation. But one thing still lingered, the one thing Nicole never saw coming. It wasn't the legal destruction. It wasn't the financial ruin. It was legacy. The one thing she could never steal back. The loyalty of our children. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the affair, the lies, or even the elaborate house of cards Nicole had tried to build behind my back. It was watching my kids learn how ugly people can be. I did everything I could to shield them from the worst of it. But even so, some wounds cut through no matter how many walls you build. One evening, a few weeks after everything settled, I found Mason sitting alone on the back porch, staring out into the yard. Silent. Thoughtful. He hadn't said much since Nicole moved out. I grabbed 2 sodas from the fridge and sat next to him. We didn't speak at first. We didn't have to. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you still hate her?" he asked softly. I exhaled. "Steady." "No," I said. He glanced at me surprised. "But I don't forgive her either," I continued. "Hate gives her too much power. Forgiveness gives her a way back in. She's neither worth my hatred nor deserving of my forgiveness." Mason absorbed my words quietly, processing them like a young man standing at a crossroads. "Is it always like this?" he asked after a moment. "With people?" I shook my head. "Not always. But when you see people for who they really are, not who you wish they were, you make better choices. People show you their character over time. You just have to learn to pay attention." He nodded slowly. His eyes hardened a little that night, not with bitterness, but with understanding. With awareness. That's the part Nicole never understood. Her betrayal didn't just fracture our marriage. She burned her bridge to her own children. Emma struggled in her own way. She was younger, softer, more confused. Some nights she'd cry quietly in her room, clutching her stuffed animals like she had when she was little. When I sat beside her, she'd always whisper the same question through her tears. "Why did Mommy do this?" And every time, my answer stayed the same. Because some people only love themselves, sweetheart. And when they do, they hurt everyone else to get what they want. That wasn't your fault. And it wasn't mine either. She'd bury her face into my chest, breathing deep, grounding herself in my heartbeat. I swore in those moments I would never fail them. The family therapist told me later that both kids were doing better than expected. "They're resilient," she said, "because you stayed solid through all of it. You were their anchor." She was being polite. What she really meant was, you didn't break. I couldn't afford to. They needed to see strength, not rage, not bitterness, not weakness. Just quiet, unwavering strength. That's the one lesson I hope sticks with them more than any other. You control how you respond. You don't control what people do to you, but you always control what comes after. Meanwhile, Nicole made a few desperate attempts to reconnect. Emails, text messages, even a letter, handwritten, no less, filled with empty apologies, revisionist history, and emotional pleas. "I still love you. It was never supposed to go this far. I made a mistake." No. A mistake is spilling coffee on your shirt. What she did was a choice, repeated, intentional choices, over and over. I never responded. The greatest revenge is silence. The greatest punishment is being erased. The world kept turning. The house stayed full of laughter again. And slowly, we built a life where her shadow no longer lived. But there was still one final loose thread. One last conversation I knew would eventually come, and it was coming faster than I expected. I knew she'd show up eventually. Nicole was many things: manipulative, calculating, selfish, but she was also persistent when desperation sank its claws into her. Her text messages had grown colder. No more apologies. No more teary pleas. Just short, clipped demands masked as requests. We need to talk. The kids need their mother. You can't keep shutting me out forever. Actually, Nicole, I could. And I would. But she wasn't ready to accept that truth. It was a Saturday morning. Mason was outside shooting hoops. Emma was inside baking cookies, humming some pop song when the doorbell rang. I didn't have to check the peephole. I already knew. Nicole stood on the porch in a dress far too expensive for her current financial reality. Her makeup was heavy, like she was trying to plaster over her collapse. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Her voice was breathy, rehearsed. Can we please talk? I stared at her for a moment, then spoke calmly. The court orders already cover everything that needs to be said. Her face twisted for a second, frustration fighting with the illusion of calm she was trying to project. This isn't about the courts, or the lawyers, or any of that, she said, forcing a brittle smile. I just want to see the kids. Off the record. Without supervision. We're still a family, despite everything that's happened. I actually laughed, short, bitter, genuine. A family? Nicole, you destroyed that concept when you turned our kids into your accomplices. She flinched, but pressed on. You've made your point. You won. You humiliated me. Publicly. Financially. Legally. What more do you want? That was the problem. She still didn't get it. It was never about winning, Nicole, I said, voice steady as a surgeon's hand. It was about protecting my children from becoming casualties of your selfishness. And you don't get to rewrite what you did just because you're uncomfortable with the fallout. Her voice sharpened, the mask slipping. You're punishing me. No, I corrected. The consequences are punishing you. I'm simply done shielding you from them. Behind me, Emma peeked from the kitchen doorway. Mason appeared on the porch, basketball under his arm. Both kids stared at her like she was a ghost. The pain in her eyes shifted, just briefly, into genuine fear. She could feel it. They no longer saw her as mom. They saw her as a stranger who nearly dismantled everything. Mason. Emma. She whispered. Mason spoke first. His voice was calm, but firm, like he'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. You need to leave. Her lips trembled. She turned to Emma, desperate for softness. But my daughter took a small step back. Bye, Mom, she said quietly. That simple goodbye hit harder than any screaming match ever could. Nicole's face crumbled. The foundation of control she'd always leaned on finally gave way. She turned back to me, her voice barely audible. You'll regret this. I shook my head. No, I said. You will. And then I shut the door. Inside, silence hung heavy for a moment. Mason put his arm around Emma as they walked back to the kitchen. No tears. No outburst. Just quiet acceptance. For the first time since this storm began, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Closure. You always think revenge will feel louder. That when justice finally lands, there'll be some grand crescendo, fireworks, fanfare, a final, cinematic blow. But that's not how it works. In reality, when the dust settles, all that's left is silence. A good kind of silence. Weeks passed after Nicole's uninvited visit. And she didn't come back. I knew she wouldn't. The last conversation stripped away the last illusion she had. She finally realized she had nothing left to bargain with. The kids made their choice, not out of spite, but survival. She wasn't their safe place anymore. I was. Always had been. Mason started sleeping better. His grades improved. He smiled more. That serious, heavy gaze in his eyes, the one I saw the night he begged me not to fall apart, slowly started fading. He wasn't carrying my burden anymore. One night as I was locking up the house, he came out on the porch. You good, bud? I asked. He nodded, then paused. You know. I'm proud of you, Dad. That one hit different. Harder than any of the blows Nicole or Darren ever threw. That one got right beneath the armor and stayed there. I swallowed and placed a hand on his shoulder. I'm proud of you too. Emma was blossoming too, lighter, freer. She got into painting. She covered the walls of her room with colorful canvases that reflected nothing but hope, joy, and innocence. Not one image of anger or darkness. The therapist said something during one of her sessions that stuck with me. Children mirror the tone of their home. And finally, the tone of our home was peace. I still received updates about Nicole from time to time, not because I asked, but because life in a small town tends to circulate information like blood through veins. She was renting a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. She took some job she was overqualified for, barely making ends meet. The kind of job that didn't give her an audience to perform for. No charity events. No lavish brunches. No adoring friends who gushed over her latest vacation or designer bag. Her world was smaller now. Isolated. Exactly the size of the space she earned. As for Darren, his situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. His plea deal fell apart when additional fraud charges came up from his earlier real estate dealings. The federal government made sure his name became synonymous with public humiliation. He lost his license. His company was liquidated. His assets seized. His wife, Julia? Oh, she came out of it untouched, financially secured, publicly vindicated, ruthless and brilliant. We stayed in quiet contact after it all ended. Not as anything romantic, just two people who both crawled out of the same wreckage and refused to let it define them. People often ask if revenge is worth it. If planning it so carefully was necessary. If orchestrating every little piece made me cold. No, it made me disciplined. You don't respond to betrayal with rage. You respond with patience. Rage fades. Patience leaves scars. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. The kids. Me. The house that used to feel like a lie now felt like home again. And Nicole? She had a front row seat to everything she lost, not through screaming, not through violence, but through her own absence from what used to be her world. That was the best revenge of all. Months turned into nearly a year. The waves Nicole had kicked up eventually settled, but they didn't disappear. The aftershocks still rippled through the circles she used to belong to. Her old friends? Gone. Her family? Embarrassed. Her parents, who once propped her up like some trophy wife, quietly distanced themselves once the legal headlines had burned out their usefulness. Even after everything was finalized, even after the scandal died down, people still whispered about her when they thought she wasn't listening. She had become what people in this town fear most. An embarrassment that no one dares associate with. One afternoon while I was picking up groceries, I saw her for the first time in months. Nicole was at the end of the checkout line, wearing clothes she wouldn't have been caught dead in a year ago, simple, worn, functional. No designer labels, no high heels, no carefully curated image. She looked like a woman who aged a decade in a matter of months. She saw me, and for 1 second, that old mask almost tried to reassemble itself. The forced smile, the flicker of charm, the default, graceful victim expression she used to wear when she needed people to feel sorry for her. But it collapsed just as quickly as it appeared, because this time, there was nothing left to salvage. I simply nodded, cool and distant, and kept walking. She didn't try to stop me. Later that night, as Mason and I were grilling on the back deck, he broke the silence. I saw her today. I already knew who he meant. At school. He nodded. She was parked outside, just sitting there in her car. I think she was waiting for Emma to come out. I set the tongs down and turned toward him. Did she talk to you? No, Mason said. She just watched for a while. Then she drove off. I exhaled slowly. This was her new existence now, orbiting her children's lives like a ghost, unable to come close but unable to let go. She thought they'd run back to her eventually. That kids always forgive. That I'd eventually let my guard down. She didn't understand that some choices leave permanent scars. Emma had begun to process things differently as well. One evening, she showed me one of her newest paintings, a bright canvas full of deep reds, strong yellows, sharp lines crossing in deliberate tension. Different than her earlier work. More grown. What's this one about? I asked. She looked at it for a long moment before answering. It's about how things break, she said, voice quiet but firm, and how sometimes they can't be put back the way they were. I put my arm around her shoulder, pulling her into me gently. You're wise beyond your years, kiddo. She smiled softly. This wasn't about bitterness anymore. It was about truth. About teaching my children what Nicole never understood. Some things once broken aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be left behind. As for me, I found myself waking up lighter every morning. Not because I forgot, but because I won. Not loudly. Not with vengeance screamed from rooftops. But with the kind of win that leaves your enemy trapped inside their own emptiness, surrounded by everything they used to have but can never regain. That's the difference between destruction and justice.